Hey yo guys, how's it going? Tally here, and today I'm going to bring you a little secret. Dark Magician is a low-key love of mine. It was the first deck I built when I got back into Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's a deck that I've continued to tinker away with over the course of my time playing the game. So I'm going to bring you, to celebrate the Megatins, my 25 duels with Dark Magician, and this will be playing against casual, rogue and meta decks, and we'll see how Dark Magician stacks up against all of them, especially with the new big boy Red-Eyes Dark Dragoon. So of course make sure to drop a like, subscribe to join Team Tally. Let's dive into Game 1. Game 1, we're up against dinosaurs, and I'm going to use this to explain some of the game plan for the deck. Basically, you want two monsters on field for Verte Anaconda. This deck actually has a lot of extenders in the forms of Apprentice Illusion, Magician's Souls and a cheeky Jester Confit, and the deck has a lot of inbuilt draw power that lets us dig into some powerful spells and traps. Oh, and by the way, we won this game. Well, in Game 2 the Asher only play and we can't win this one. Let's move on to Game 3. So even though we have games like Game 2, we do have games like Game 3. We have plays in hand, and since our opponent didn't feel like comboing off, we managed to take advantage of their misplay by setting up our board and pushing for more draw power and damage, leaving us with two negates for their turn and a big beefy Dragoon to deal with, which took us the win. Game 4 sees the end of this trilogy, and Impermanence on the Isolde was definitely the smart move here by locking them out of some of their combo, forcing them to try their Orcus plays, but they didn't really think it through and decided they would rather scoop than be destroyed by us on our turn. I'll take that, because we were going to absolutely destroy them on our turn anyway. In Game 5 we're up against Predaplant Dragma. Now, this game started off weird since they super polyed my Dragoon, but thankfully this deck has more plays than just a Dragoon. I went into Ebon Illusion Magician for a bit of an easy board clear, and I had the Quick Play Fusion in hand to push for a little more damage, and when an effect is activated I get to dig further into my deck. I negated their Fleur de Lis so that they couldn't beat over anything, and the combo of Eternal Souls and Dark Magician just let me push for game. And now we're up against Infernoid, and in this one we had an easy setup that allowed us to dig a few cards deeper into the deck while getting Dragoon on field with two negates available to us. Our opponent tried to destroy our back row, but that only forced me into getting any Dark Magician card I wanted to my hand, so I'm okay with that. I ended up managing to dig even deeper into more good cards for my opponent's turn, and when I went to push for game, they quit. In Game 7 we're up against Generators, and this went kinda poorly. I didn't open up great and they opened up amazingly. We managed to push for a few turns, but eventually they just had too much advantage. Again, these things happen, so it's okay. In Game 8 we've got a legendary battle between two iconic decks, Dark Magician and Red-Eyes, who coincidentally make up the boss of our deck. Now, our opponent tried their best to dig through their deck for something to out our big boy, but ultimately they couldn't get away to beat our Red-Eyes. Ironic, but they decided to quit anyway. Game 9 sees us up against what? No, like I mean what? Yeah, but I mean what? Anyway, that's not even funny. They tried to banish our Dragoon, which just made him more powerful, and on our turn we had a million extenders to go into an easy victory with Dragoon blowing the final strike. In Game 10 we're up against Scrap, and they opened with what I assume is good since Scraps need a lot of extenders, but I opened up even better. I get to negate their key cards and then they go ahead and misplay to make a win super easy. Getting over a single Scrap Wyvern shouldn't be too hard, and since we have the nuts, they scoop. Okay, now we're up against Phantom Knight Infernity, and fun fact, I'm a bit of a dummy because I left no card in hand to discard with Dragoon. This happens more than I'd like to admit if I'm honest, but I still had multiple points of interaction that forced them to scoop, and I'll take that. If you don't know, I'm a fan of free wins here. In Game 12 we're up against the cutest thing ever, but my handsome boy Dragoon is going to do some real damage here. I did that no card in hand thing again, but really, they aren't going to do anything to me, so I felt pretty safe with a negate and a banish and a win. Game 13 we're up against Shaddoll Magician Girls. Okay. Now, in this one my opponent was really rude. I don't handle rudeness very well, so I decided he was going to get a smacking. So I comboed off, and as soon as they seen Verte they called me a scrub. They said they'd destroy me and that I was going to lose. Well, I just couldn't have that really, so I pushed for a bit of damage and negated their play. They tried to set up a Winda. My response was to banish it with Dark Magical Circle. They scooped after that one and had some real nice things to say. In Game 14 we're up against Dragon Link, and this deck really is a serious contender. It simply runs too many extenders for even the vast majority of meta decks to handle, and it runs too many for us to handle too. I thought it was Dinos, so I shotgunned a negate on the Misk, since that usually hurts Dino, but I was tricked here, and I lost. However, in Game 15 we're up against Pendulum, and I do love Pendulum and it's pretty satisfying to beat them, especially when they open up Dark Worm and Pencall. This game really is a lesson in why you don't activate spells in the same column as your opponent's set cards. I managed to halt their plays and break their board, and do it again on the next turn to make them scoop. In Game 16 we're up against another really good rogue deck in Fluffle. Now, I'm pretty happy with the performance here. We simply do the usual and banish their key monsters and save the negate for Verte. With that, they had no more resources, and we take the win on this one. In Game 17 we are up against Fossil Megalith, and it looks like our opponent had a weird hand but probably had plays if they got a turn to play after mine, so of course I couldn't have that. I did the thing, set up Dragoon, Verte and the Dark Magicians to OTK my opponent. In Game 18 we're playing against Mech Knight Invoked, and I'll be honest, our opponent opened up a perfectly playable hand, but they decided to scoop after seeing Dragoon. I mean, like, I'm okay with that, I do take free wins, but they did have plays and chose not to play them. I don't know if it's just Dragoon in general does that to people. In Game 19 I went up against a deck I really did not see coming, and that was Code Talker Extra Link. They did manage to get off their Extra Link, get up their lock as well, and I just didn't really have many answers to it, so we lost this one. In Game 20 we're up against some sort of weird Gizmek Kaiju deck, and our opponent took out our Dragoon with a Kaiju followed up by Mystic Mine, which would normally prompt a scoop from me, but the cool thing about this deck is that it has built-in back row hate through Dark Magical Circle and Eternal Soul, so as soon as we got rid of their mine, they scoop it up since we have an easy win for next turn. Game 21 we were up against Orcus and they super poly my whole board away, which is one of this deck's biggest weaknesses, and since Verte and my search spell left me solo on life points, they OTK'd pretty easily. That one's on me. In Game 22 we were up against my favourite deck, Heroes. In a similar situation, I left myself low on life points and they summoned out Big Bane, who is an absolute champ of a card, and unfortunately they won it as well. They got lucky with the Honest Neo straw though. I'd survived if it weren't for that, but Hero is my favourite deck, so I'm not ashamed of losing to them. Game 23 sees us up against Tenyi, and they're a funny deck. If you hit the Link 2 with a negate, it turns off almost all of their entire deck. So that's what we did, and then they quit. Game 24 we're up against Monarch and they tried to tribute my Dragoon, so we hit that with a big fat no. Then when I tried to pop their Frosty Boy, it turns out they have a card that gave it protection, so we smack it with our staff and the Mirror Force only makes me stronger. After that they're left with no resources and we take the win on it. For our final game we're up against Sky Striker and we open up weird, so we pass hoping they can't OTK. Now we go through some resources, bait some negates and still end on a Dragoon. They try to Mystic Mine us, but they put themselves in an awkward spot, but if they try to Gamma me, they'll lose because of Mystic Mine. And I bet they try to target it with Widow Anchor and realise they can't target Dragoon to steal it. So it's an easy win here too when they scoop. Guys, that's it. Guys, that is the video. Thank you very much for watching. As always, if you like it, give it a like. If you love it, give it a share and tell everyone you know about Team Tally today. And if you haven't joined Team Tally, then subscribe down below. As always, let me know what you think down in the comments section. And as always, guys, you have been amazing. I have been Tally. I will catch you all later, I hope. Bye.